All right, well, welcome to the November meeting physical meeting of the PowerShell user group, Research Triangle PowerShell user group. So today's topic is going to be about profiles and what's inside your profile and what's inside your profile scripts. And so I'm going to start off really quick with basically what is your profile and how do you use it, and what is a profile. And this is PowerShell. If you don't know, get help. Okay, so get help's your friend. And you can just any PowerShell prompt help about _ profiles. There's an entire man page wiki you can read. You can go to the Microsoft webpage. You can get it for the version that you're currently using. So there are whatever version PowerShell that you're currently using. So help _ or about _ profiles will give you the help that is relevant to version 2 if you're still using version 2. So it will give you the appropriate help for that one. So profiles work a little differently for version 2 than they do with version 5.1 and 6 and 7 at that point, but it is that. So let's talk about profiles. Profiles are effectively like init scripts. I call them init scripts back in the Linux and Unix days. But it is a PowerShell script that is run at startup time. And so what that means is it will run through all 4 of these locations. It will look for a file at this location, for each location based upon what user you are and everything like that. So it will go through this order and run all of these in sequence. And so if you put these files together, it will run all 4 of these files, but in that fashion. So if you use this one here, I can't do it there.
Sorry, did you say it's in that sequence that you had up there?
I think so. I believe it's that. It's all users, then current users. It's in sequence, down to up or top to bottom. So it will run the profile in the PS home and PS home and they say PS home at this point because it's cross-plat. And so whatever the home folder is for the system itself, I don't know what it is in a Unix box, but if you're on a Linux box and you type PS home, it'll give you what that path is. So it doesn't really matter what it is.
Question, how do we see active profile files?
It's a script that's run. It's not an active profile.
Yeah.
And so when you start the instance of PowerShell, it will run the script. It will run whatever's in that it will run that PS1 file. It will dot source that file.
The session.
Yes, it will dot source that file and keep on going. So if you've had an instance where you start PowerShell and it's just sitting there for 9 seconds, well, it's doing all of these in order. And so there's potentially something in the profile that is a system. And so it's setting for all users, for the current host, and then there are multiple hosts. And then, so that's the first. The second one is current host, but that's like the PowerShell host. There are multiple hosts. We don't need to get into the weeds there. But the reason being it too is if you're still using Windows, if you're using PowerShell Windows, there is a special ISE profile. It will still run the top 6, the 4, that we ran before, but then it will also run the one for ISE if you happen to be running it in ISE.
So will these profiles run when you start ISE, or will they run if you might run ISE?
I don't understand what that means.
In every ISE session you
every
open.
time you start ISE, it'll run that.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless you pass the argument no profile.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. So that's in the man page. Sorry, I didn't mention that. So when you're in so the question would be, at this point, there is a profile parameter. And so inside your profile or in other places, you can go check for what the path is and if it's been defined and such like that. So there is a variable inside PowerShell called $profile, and that is what the current, so if you do $profile, you'll get it. So here's the next thing. So there it is on my machine. So the profile returned me the profile, see users, my username, boss, the documents folder. So it's in my current home. That is my home path all the way down. That's what it would be looking for. But then the all users is in the system Windows 32, system 32.
And you didn't create each one of those, correct?
No,
that was already there.
You can see me. I'm just running $profile dot all users all hosts, and that's the return value.
Okay, hold on. So the value is there, but the folder and the script are not necessarily there.
Correct.
Good to
So
know.
it will go and reach out to those paths, and if it didn't exist, it would just keep on going.
So that's just a call to the actual, I guess, variable, right? So
Yeah.
you do profile, or do you do profile dot?
It's just telling you what it is what PowerShell is using to go figure out where that path is.
Gotcha.
And so it, as part of the startup process, it will try and find that file. If it exists, it will run it. If it doesn't exist, it just keeps on going. But it will do that for all 5 of these items, or actually all 4 of these. And you notice that one of them is the same. So the last one is the
Does it
same.
change if you turn off UAC?
No.
Okay.
Well, UAC is just a matter of, if you're elevated or not. So it will do whatever, is respective of UAC.
Now, it does change if your UAC requires you to run as a different user. So like if you're on a standard user, your UAC prompts is not yes, but you type in a different username and password,
Okay.
then
Yeah.
that will change to to the other account
Well,
that you just typed in.
Yeah, so effectively in that UAC prompt, you're using your admin credential in that UAC prompt. You are now running it as that other user.
Okay.
So in that case, this would not be my regular account. It would be my administrative account. So PowerShell will be running as the other account. And it would be that profile. The system ones would stay the same, but the home would be different.
So all user scripts will still run, but the current user would not run because you'd be in a different user's time.
Well, it'll just run for a different.
Yeah, the $home, the PS home would be a different path.
Right.
So
I think I follow.
I don't know if you can see it up there. This part right here is different. Yeah, I don't know if I can annotate. But the C users, boss MPX, it would be different. It would be the admin account. C users, the admin account, documents, that kind of stuff. All right.
Wasn't there, in addition to the ISE profile, wasn't or isn't there also a Microsoft.VS Code profile?
There is one for VS Code as well, but it's unique to VS Code. But it's for that instance.
The VS Code is supposed to replace ISE, right?
Not supposed to. It's just, yeah, it is. But
Whether you want to or not.
the ISE
No, I think they said they're
it's not-
freezing it, they're not getting rid of it.
So ISE is frozen. It's not. There's nothing more to it. But the
We're not changing.
Nothing so.
Coming from a Unix background, it's a little weird to see like all these
That's the one
different
good.
users on a workstation. I mean, you create a user ID in Linux and you get an account in .home,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And if you can, like at the network level,
So
if you want to change shells and stuff and do different parameter setups, usually you set up like in the .profile where that stuff will be pulled into the local account on login and it gets variability in what their environment looks like. But I'm trying to figure out why what is the wisdom that escapes me that Microsoft put all this different account structure on a single machine? Is it
no, the accounts are still there. There we go. So the accounts are still there. So
like,
on a
why have-
Unix
why-
machine,
why
on a
have
Unix
all
machine.
users, all hosts, and all users current hosts, and it's kind of like one person, one machine. And
So
You may have different VMs that you're going on.
Well, two things. One, it's not one user, one machine. You can log on to multiple different machines.
And you
okay,
can have
so-
multiple users on a single machine.
Yeah.
Terminal server.
okay.
So don't think of a current host PowerShell host. So on a Unix machine, on a Linux machine, the PWSH PowerShell instance is a single host. I'm not sure of any multiple. It is a host, but there are multiple hosts. But in that world, you're typically only dealing with one, so you don't really have to think about it so much.
This is more like your bash RC.
But even yes,
Because
it certainly
it's
is.
not, this is not your login. There's a separate login script for you in Windows. This is only when you run PowerShell.
Oh,
So this is
okay.
more equivalent to the bash RC.
So this is
Okay.
exactly bash RC. This is bash RC's file, but bash RC is only for bash script shell, and then you got KRSH for your corn shell, and then all the other shell .profile itself is for the other ones.
Okay.
So
I'm
it is
trying not
literally
to
the
ask a
exact.
bunch of remedial.
No,
it's not a remedial question.
It's not your login
It's an
script.
illustration.
Yeah.
But it's just a different point of view. So, yeah, so
Well,
please do
Linux
ask
has
the
a,
question.
Linux has a login script also.
Yeah, there's a dot
There's-
profile.
I guess there's
Oh,
Etsy,
no,
Bash.
that's your local one. There's a system one also.
No, but that's what all
No,
users.
this is still PowerShell. There's a
No, no, no.
login script in
But,
Linux. also.
but this is, when you start PWSH, that's the path it's gonna run for the entire system.
I'm saying if you don't start any scripts, there's still a login script in Linux and Windows, separate from this.
It's a system, yeah, but that's not what this is.
Right, that's one
So
thing.
here's a quiz for me, and I'm failing it in my mind.
No, you're not, you just haven't asked the question
I
yet.
haven't- So let's say you have your normal everyday account, your user.
Mhm.
I'm user Rob.
Yep.
And then to perform administrative tasks out on servers, I'm user Rob. In the Windows world, I'm user Rob A for my administrative account. Let's just say that's your corporate convention. If I want to use my handy dandy PowerShell profile, where should I put my stuff as an admin? I want to be able to go on as an admin on a VM or whatever, and just not have to think about having all those aliases.
So this is kind of exactly where we eventually get to.
Mhm.
So on the machines that you want to connect to, and some, I think he's done some of it with that. So what I do is I put a profile on a network share,
Okay.
and inside my local profile, I reach out to that network share.
Okay.
I do a test to see that it exists, and then I launch whatever script that is.
What you're
So
talking about.
in my normal one, but then other machines that haven't been initialized for that, it doesn't do any of that, just normal stuff.
Okay.
They're going, hey, this machine, I need to run that profile, and I want to do it all the time.
Okay.
All right, so then I have this other script where I go init that profile, and then from now on, this machine, using this account, will also run that script.
Go grab it. Okay.
See, I think that's too complicated. I think for me, what I've done is just created my own module and ship it everywhere I need to. And most of what I'm doing is not going on to different admin servers or servers and using the profile.
Yeah.
I'm using a command. I'm using WinRM to execute, remote commands. So I'm not worrying about the profile on my Exchange server under my admin account, or I'm not worrying about the profile on my domain controller, right? I'm worried more about, this is more so about, my host where I'm doing stuff every day. What can I have available to my profile to, I don't know, pull Beatty servers that have this property or something like that.
Right.
That's not really the use case, in my opinion, for profiles.
I'm used to, in the old days, when my account was set up, that /users was off a NASBox. And every time I logged on,
It mounted right.
so you got the same thing no matter where you logged into, except maybe certain administrative machines. You might not get it there.
Yeah, so if you had where you had a roaming profile and your profile was there, well, your home would roam to that. And so actually in my Citrix environment, if my user is logging in, it's the same home no matter where I go, because that profile is roamed around.
Right.
But on my local PC, you don't map to that home because there's a network disconnect.
We used to where I used to work. They did, because and not only
Well,
that, it was shared with.
But how do you do it offline? So right now, I can't connect to
Yeah,
my
that's
home
true.
drive right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So in my Citrix environment, it's all within the data center.
Yeah,
Hey, it's all there.
It's VDI specific or
Yeah,
something like that. I'm sure.
So all of
Right.
that does point to one.
Yeah.
But effectively, it's the dollar home. It's a $PS home.
Uh-huh.
And so that is the same no matter where it is on any of those machines. So
For my Linux gentlemen, just think of this as if you just type in export. You type export and you see all the variables that you have access. Just think of it the same way.
Well, actually, all this dialogue's making me wonder, okay, so if I put together a script and I'm going to use the script to, maybe hit some network resource, or maybe hit a process that's running as a what do you call them, host services, where they're, if you look at them in the process table, they're kind of blind. So I'm wondering, is there impact on the object model by loading from different profiles when you run a script? So is it kind of like, if I write a script and I run it as me from my profile from all users, will it actually maybe not exclude the network resources? So you see what I mean? I'm trying to figure out
It depends on the authentication methods you're using to access those resources, right? I mean, if you're using a Linux session with a credential that has access to other resources, then
right.
Okay, so
Problem solved,
let's
right?
come
So
back
that's
to,
the profile.
this is
Yeah,
separate, this is,
So
Yeah.
having profile load in all these different places doesn't really actually change anything operationally
No.
from my.
no, this is only a validation. This is not reaching out to network shares, okay? Inside, what's inside the PS1s, and could be some tasks that reach out, but in those fashions, you shouldn't be doing that. Or be-
And,
It's-
and these are only a run once. When
And,
you
yeah.
start up, it runs, it loads all that into your session, and then
Yeah.
you're done with these.
And we kind
All
of
of it
talked about,
exists in your session after that.
so Kevin talked about, there's an option to say no profile. You can kick off the PowerShell
Yeah,
without
I
a
think I've
profile.
used that a lot.
Well, it's only there because if you have a bunch of stuff there that, hey, I need, this is, I'm just gonna run this one script that does this, and I need to run, like, it should be, boom, done and done. I don't need to have it running for, 3 seconds, or on this machine, just understand what the impact is. It's not so much if it's a performance
I'll
tuning
look
thing, it's
for,
just a
like,
matter
an
of,
RFC where they wrote about this.
About health profiles.
About health profiles,
Yeah.
you'll get much more detail than what we're finding here.
These aren't there by default. Like, you have to create the profile.ps1 script for
Yes,
it to run.
that's
So
true.
by
Just tells you
default,
what
if
it
it's a
looks like.
brand new machine that you haven't logged on before and you haven't specifically created one of these files, it's not going to run anything because there's nothing there for it to find. So this is very specific. I want to do something every time I launch PowerShell. My example I'll show later on is I want to know whether or not I'm an administrator, because if I launch without an administrator, I want it to say, hey, you're not an administrator right now. Because if you go do a demo and then you look dumb because whatever you run isn't working, and you go, oh wait, it says at the top I'm not an administrator. Let me relaunch as administrator. So there's going to be very specific use cases like that where you want these profile scripts to kind of just tell you something when you first start up the session.
Thanks,
So-
that helps a lot, because how do you use them is kind of what.
Yeah, let's throw some code.
So here's a good example at this point. This is the one I use in my Citrix environment. And so when it launches PowerShell, the first thing it does is at the very top, it says, hey, it does a question, and it says, hey, do you have the snap in? And if it's not there, basically throws an error. If it's not there, we'll go load it.
Snap it.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
old school snap in. And originally, when VMware had their own snap in, I did VMware too.
That's right, yeah.
But now that their module, I just commented this part out, but it kind of is a reminder for me.
Snap-ins are gone.
Well, snap-ins were a way of injecting.
No, I know what
C#.
snap-ins were, but, so they're kind of gone now,
Correct.
everything's just modules.
Right.
Yes.
It's much more efficient to do it using module,
Yes.
to inject stuff using module.
See, that's news to me.
Yep.
The last time
Yep.
I looked at that.
Today you learned something.
Yeah,
Awesome.
there you go. All right, we're done. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
sweet.
Have a good night, guys.
Snap.
So,
Wow.
so then to keep on going, so there's some code here at this point on these Citrix servers. It says, hey, the command is, if I can get the farm, if I have the module and I'm able on a Citrix server that has it, that I have all the tools, I can actually talk to my Citrix environment. It then goes and it pre-populates a bunch of variables for me. This is, you don't really need all this other stuff, so that whenever I'm on the Citrix box, at the very end, the objective is that I have a variable I've pre-cached. So when this launches, it takes like 4 seconds to run. Now, at that point, I'm like, okay, so when I first launched my PowerShell session, okay, it's going to sit there for 4 seconds. But it's only one time it went and pulled my entire Citrix farm, and now I have these dynamic variables that I don't need to go query my environment every time I want to run. I have these on
You do
fly
that all the time, though, right?
Huh?
So I'm assuming you do this all the time. You query $XA
Yeah.
server often.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And at that point, now it's an array. I can simply say, $XA variable minus some name, and there's all my servers with that name. Here's my app list. There's the current apps that are currently published. There's app details. Well, there is, again, the list of just apps, and then there is the apps with all their details in that. So what servers are they pointing to? Who's connected to what? And I build that on the fly, and I do it at once. And so in this environment, you can kind of see, hey, what is the application? Who's it provisioned to? What accounts are provisioned to it? What servers are hosted from that application? And then what the servers are. I do some other stuff with group names and what groups. And so all of this, I pre-stage all this into a variable, and now I have it for me to use whenever I want. And so it's kind of a one-time go get some data and hold on to it. And then it does the same thing for a different environment. All right. And then it does some prompt stuff for PowerShell Git. So it does some customization. It customizes the
you change the color of the prompt and all that?
Yeah, if I have, so that code right there will change the prompt based upon whether it is a Git.
Which
If I'm in a Git repo, it'll change the prompt.
Yeah.
If I go to a different folder that doesn't have a Git repo, it will just be a normal
I do the
prompt.
same thing too. I even change the color when we move into different branches.
Yeah, that does that whole thing. That's part of Git Posh.
Cool.
And so that is just on my Citrix servers, and that's pretty much it at that point. So that is an example of what would be in that profile. And you can see it is Microsoft PowerShell _ profile.
Can you talk about this? The Posh Git, is that something you built or did you download?
No,
it?
it's a PowerShell module.
It's in the gallery. Okay.
It's in the gallery.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff.
Can you talk about function prompt on line 65? What, you're just creating a function called prompt?
No,
What
yes,
is that?
that's redefining the prompt function. There is a function inside your system called prompt.
Yeah, okay.
And so if you want to customize your prompt to do whatever it is, you're redefining that prompt.
Yep.
You need to like put a comment up there that says like, lifesaver, because you know how many people could destroy branches without having proper color.
Yeah. So that's my primer. I can talk some more, but I'd like to really get some other people to talk about stuff. And who's talking in chat?
Yeah. So Trevor Sullivan is first. So
All right. So does Trevor want to steal
You should
control?
really just take control, actually.
yeah.
And then can we?
Trevor, if you can hear us,
can
go
you
ahead.
unmute
Go ahead and
yourself?
trade control and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure, we can. Awesome. Thank
And
you.
then do you want to take control?
And
Or
I'm going to share here in a second. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks for
Cool.
sharing that, by the way. It's really cool.
hopefully get some more cool stuff.
So another thing real quick, because there was a question in Twitter about this is people wanted to actually have the profile shared. So if you want to create a folder or something under our repo, if you want to do a pull request to get it added to it, we'll go ahead and add all your profile scripts so other people can see them. If you're not comfortable with that, as far as Git and all that, you can send them to the RTPsug Gmail account, and I'll add them individually.
Yeah, we'll get it up there if you don't know how to, working with Git and not sure how to, share the code. We can work with you to get that shared out.
Yeah.
Can we actually attach PS1 file now?
Just copy and paste it into this email. Just paste the code.
Oh, in the body.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. All yours, Trevor.
I have two different use cases that I wanted to share for a profile script. It does involve initialization of a service credentials, kind of similar to the example that was just shown on Citrix PS Snap-in. But basically what I'm doing here is I have a multi-factor authentication set up with AWS for my company account. And so what I typically do is I use Twilio's Authy application for multi-factor authentication. I don't know if any of you have used Authy before, but it's really nice because it synchronizes all of your MFA codes across different devices. So I can get MFA codes on my Mac, on Windows, on Android, et cetera, et cetera. There's even a Chrome extension for it. So if you're using like a Chrome OS device, you can actually use the Chrome OS or Chrome extension kind of natively on Chrome OS to get MFA codes. And so because I have to use MFA credentials in order to make any API calls against AWS, I thought, well, hey, it's kind of a pain. Like every 12 hours, my credentials expire. These temporary credentials that I get expire after 12 hours. So wouldn't it be nice if I could automate retrieving this MFA token code and just inject that into this command for AWS that consumes the token code along with my called access key and secret access key, which are kind of AWS specific concepts that I won't get into. But wouldn't it be cool if I could just capture that token code from Authy in an automated fashion and then refresh that token without having to manually open Authy, click the copy button, switch back to my shell, and then paste that value. So what I did inside of my profile script is I created a simple function called update AWS session token. And that actually, by default, has a parameter called token. And token code, if you don't specify it, we'll call this getAuthie TOTP function. I forget what TOTP stands for. It's something one-time password. But basically, if we take a look at this getAuthie TOTP function, what I'm doing is I'm using this OCR application called Tesseract, and then I'm also using this open source utility that somebody created called getWindowID. So I basically say if those two utilities are not installed, then go ahead and install them. But then what I do is I use this getWindowID utility to find the Authy desktop window, which is pretty much always open on my computer. It's always kind of open like this. And what I do is I capture a screenshot using the built-in macOS screen capture utility, and I pass in the ID for the Authy desktop application. And then once I've captured a screenshot just of this window that has Authy itself, I can run Tesseract, which is an optical character recognition utility, against the screenshot of that Authy window. And then I basically return, at the end of the function, I return the value of the one-time password from Authy, which gets fed into this update AWS session token. Sure. And ultimately it calls this get STS session token, which is part of the AWS PowerShell module. And that is the command that accepts my my virtual MFA device, or my software token here. And so basically I can actually refresh my temporary credentials every 12 hours, as long as this window is open to this screen here. I mean, I have a bunch of other accounts in there as well, but as long as it's just opened up to this screen, that getWindowID utility, the screen capture, and Tesseract can actually capture this 6-digit passcode using a regular expression, and then return it, and then automatically refresh my token. So that reduces the amount of manual effort that's involved in updating my temporary credentials for AWS. So basically, if I'm in a PowerShell session, all I have to do at any point in time is just call update AWS session token, and it will go through that process of capturing the window, running OCR against it, and updating my credentials file, which is under AWS credentials. So I'm not going to cat that file because it has my temporary session token in there. But it basically creates any file format that has my temporary credentials. So that's one use case. The other use case for my profile script, which unfortunately I heard somebody else talking about this as well. I actually lost my profile script back when I rebuilt my Mac as well. But I actually have a video that captures it pretty well. It basically uses this custom font called Nerd Fonts. Sorry, let me find it here.
Java skills are always in demand. You should take online Java courses on Udemy. They've got
certainly just add a put in the show notes, or the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes. Oh, cool. Let's subscribe.
Just to give you kind of a quick overview of what it actually does, it allows you to use this font called Nerd Fonts, which has a bunch of glyphs in it. So think of glyphs like icons. Some of you might have heard of, what is it called, Font Awesome, and Powerline fonts and other things like that. Well, what Nerd Fonts does is it actually takes all these different like icon fonts, like Font Awesome that has brand fonts and things, and you can actually embed those icons directly into your shell. So if you were to take a look at what my customized shell looked like, trying to find it here. Well, you guys can watch the video and figure it out, but basically you can get like Git icons or like Spotify icons if you want to like see what your current music playback is in your shell, or if you want like a date time to show up in your shell. Actually, I think I have it right here. So see, this is what a customized shell looks like. So I have this Git icon, and it shows my current hash of the Git commit that I'm currently working on. And then you can also see on the right-hand side here, I have this little like calendar icon, and then the current date and time. So these glyphs are actually coming from Nerd Fonts, and this video kind of shows you how to set all that stuff up. And the other feature is using ANSI escape sequences, which are supported in PowerShell v6. And that's how I get the coloring of these different text elements here as well. So unfortunately, I don't have the code handy for that because it got wiped out with my Mac rebuild. But this video kind of talks about it. I published it a couple of months ago.
Your backups.
That's all I got. It's pretty cool.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for
Thank you.
Really cool stuff.
So I think one of the lessons here is that, certainly you can do a ton of stuff. Now, one of the points is that he puts it in his profile, so it's available to him whenever he just launches it. So that's really the power. You can also notice that in my environment, basically, I ran a bunch of code and I pre-staged a bunch of variables. And in his profile, he just defined a bunch of functions that, hey, when he's ready to call them, he calls them. But that function will always be available to him, and to your point, hey, I just threw it into a module and then I just import the module when I need to.
That.
So that is an option to you. So, but the profile is that place where you can say, you can write a script, but basically, here's the things that I want to do all the time. Here's the functions that I always want to be available to me. Or here's even, a place where I import my credentials from credential provider. Okay, I can do that. So another place that I've had is that, hey, in my admin, if I put it in my admin, it automatically imports all my admin credentials.
Yep.
And a bunch of admin stuff for my admin stuff. So I can't show that, but.
And this is one of the areas where having those multiple different profile files comes in real handy, because the functions that you use everywhere, no matter which interface you're using, you define in the main all users, all hosts profile. But things that you want to vary, like you may want to have a different prompt if you're in the ISE or in VS Code or in a console, you would define different prompt functions in each of the current host profile files for those things.
So question, every profile file and those paths that were listed, they run regardless. Let's say the first one runs.
If it exists.
So let's say you have a file in each one of those paths. It's going to run every single one, or is it just going to stop at the one that runs?
It's going to run them all.
Okay.
Yeah. Go from the most general to the most specific.
It would run them all, assuming that they're there.
Gotcha.
So again, to Kevin's point, is that the files aren't there by default. You need to put them
You
there.
have to put them there. I understand.
And you even have to create the folders too. So if you try to do a new item on that, it will give you an error because the folder that it needs to be in typically doesn't exist either.
Okay.
So if you go into Documents, there's no Windows PowerShell there. And then on top of creating the folder, you also need to create the profile.ps one.
Yep.
I usually just run Notepad $profile, and then when it's like, it doesn't here, you want it, you just say yes, and then it builds it all.
Or if you have Visual Studio Code installed, you can actually type in code space $profile, and it'll fire up your profile.
Yeah.
VS Code.
Because it uses that variable.
Correct.
And then, hey, code that file. And so it creates the file. Actually, it just creates a temp file, and then you finally save it. Just from there. Cool.
Then we have one more so far. Anybody else, feel free to send me a message. But Stevie, you are up.
Is there audio?
Stevie!
He's not muted.
Stevie, hey.
He's got cold feet now.
Stevie Wonder. No, he is pretty wonderful though.
I don't know. Anybody else here locally want to talk about some profiles? You talk about
I mean, I can share mine.
I'm listening in for now.
All right.
That's pretty cool stuff.
So the one I want to share is basically, I've been doing like training things on campus for people that are completely new to PowerShell. And the thing I always run into is I launch a PowerShell thing, I try to go show them, some different code that I wrote, try to walk through stuff, and then I hit something that needs administrative rights. Dang it, that didn't work. I feel really dumb trying to teach people PowerShell, and then I run across something that throws an error, right? And I probably have it all coded out and everything and written down, but I'm running through and I hit that. So I was like, you know what? It'd be really nice if every time I launched, I had something that just popped up in my face and said, hey, you're not administrator. If you want to be administrator, do this. And so I did have it at one point. Let's see here. Hold on. Share content. I did have it at one point where I was working. So I just did one profile because when I initially wrote this, I didn't realize there was different paths, and I just created the one profile, and it actually went out and checked. First off, it checks whether or not.
Can you zoom in a little bit, please?
I actually did learn something today too.
Dark magenta.
Yeah, dark magenta.
There is a presentation theme that makes it
I see.
very readable.
Wow.
So that's actually probably too big then. So I basically go out and I find out, am I
the right side.
Yeah, am I the administrator? And then I go through and I find out, well, what is my my host? So I do if $PSISE, because that in the ISC it'll return something, in console it will not. So I know whether or not I'm in the ISE. I go ahead and I just basically restart it as a administrator. And I'm trying to think here about sharing this. I should be able to share my whole screen and not have it like, because right now I'm just sharing this window. So I'll show you what it looks like.
So what, like, which path did you place this profile to run in?
So I placed this in the, I think it ends up being the all users.
So the impact there with all users, or 99% of the time, you'll only be putting it into your own user profile. So in the case where I was putting it into the all users was the place where, hey, this is on a utility server that all my admins are going to connect to. And so I wanted to make this the profile for everybody. So I put it in the all users. And so anybody logs in. Typically, if your own machine, why put it in all users unless you're going to be logging in as multiple users, as an admin or not? You'd want to put it there. But if you're not, then you could, in fact, I kind of think if it's an admin thing, well, just put it in the admin's profile. Because when you're going to log in as your admin anyway, or even you are authenticated, it's going to create a profile for that user. A Windows profile, again, Windows profile, but even in the Linux world, it's the same thing. There is a profile, you know, that user has a approved profile. It's got a home somewhere. So it just has to be, just put it in that path.
You can see here I've launched PowerShell IC, and right across the top, I guess I did it, it says double warning there, but PowerShell is running without admin rights. To change this, and I don't, set administrator is not always there, but it's a function that I load if I'm not the administrator. So I can do set administrator, and then it's going to say, hey, you're going to lose any data if you do this. Hit enter if you want to continue. So I hit enter, and it'll give me the USC prompt, and then it should relaunch me as administrator.
Nice.
And so now I got a green thing that says PowerShell is running as administrator. So now I know that I could break some stuff. So let me open that back up so I can kind of go through that some more. And I'm going to go back to the default theme because this is crazy looking. And just zoom in. So I have a bunch of notes in here because I wasn't sure what Phil was going to go over, but you know, I have mentioning about the different profile paths and all that kind of stuff. Here's my actual code where I check, am I the administrator? Then if I'm not, I go ahead and throw up the warning about it. And like I showed you before, so if $PSISE, I run this, and then I can also do host name is console host, and then I run this. And basically it's just a start process, and then kill off the old process, and a read host just to make sure that I'm not going to delete data or something like that if I had a script open that wasn't saved, which I actually did while I was writing this, and I had to rewrite part of it. So I was testing it. And
so kind of an example there. Now, I don't have an example here because I stopped doing it just because of pain to try and travel it around. But the idea is that when I was an admin, I would change the background to be red instead of black. So I changed all the text color, and the background was a different color. And so that was just one of those things. So then it was very easy for me. I had multiple console windows open, and I go, that's my admin console, that's my regular user console. And it was really easy because I lived in the shell. I didn't really use the ISE or code. So I had multiple shells open and going, that's the one I'm looking for. And it was just very easy to know because otherwise, okay, which one are we in? Even though Microsoft does throw like administrator at the top if you're running as administrator, but it's, if you got Windows and Windows and Windows, you don't really know.
So sorry, real quick. Another thing here too, because I read some other stuff where people had things where they set the whole shell like a different color. And so another thing that came up, which I'd never used before, is this Git host, and you have this this background color. and you can set the whole thing to a specific color. And so the colors are actually all here. If you give it an invalid color, it'll throw an error to show you all the colors that are actually valid. And so that's why I have this commenting in here, just to cover all that kind of stuff. But what I did find, and I was messaging on Discord earlier, is once I set it, that's actually not for the session. Once you set it like that in ISE, it'll continue, it'll persist. So you actually have to go into, and this is where I found the presentation view, you have to go in and do a restore defaults. Because I could not get it to go back because there's not a PowerShell blue option. There's a blue, which is a lighter blue, and there's a dark blue, which is a darker blue, and it drove me crazy because I could not find the exact blue that you need. So
yeah, it seems like there was a trick to getting back to it. But you both talked about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's changing the background colors in my screens. Okay. I've been doing PowerShell since version 2, and they've gone through like 4 different ways to change colors and stuff like that, and broken the previous ones every time they've done it. Okay?
Well, yeah. So you now need to do a check. If I'm running a PS version table of this,
and what's worse is there's things that I used to could do that you can't do now. Okay. For one thing, it used to be you could change the background color of one ISE window separate from another one. Now, if you change the background color in one, it changes in all your ISE sessions. Okay. Another is I used to basically part of my profile would define functions like to activate Exchange if I was going to be doing some Exchange work. And part of that, I would run something that would change the background color of the screen at the same time. So I could tell, oh, my red screen is my Exchange window. Okay.
Red.
Yeah, whatever. But
on fire already.
The point is that that was all working until PS Read Line 2. The PS Read Line 2, there's commands are all still there to change your background color, change all your icons, your token colors, all that kind of fun stuff, and so on. But at the very end of it, the last thing it does is it says, oh, reset to default, where default is defined as if you go into the properties of a console and change the colors there, okay, and it doesn't give you a way to change that value. So you set your screen to whatever color, and then it immediately resets the default back. So the next command you issue, you start getting funky colors again.
I'd be interested to find if there's some people who don't do that. Have you put that out to ask?
I've done a lot of searching. I have not done a lot of posting
ask
about
the
it.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think they're, is it Rayner may know if you could do that. Thomas Rayner would know. So
okay, because like I said, it all, of course, used to work, but
because he does a bunch of crazy stuff with his prompt.
And I chased it down to the very tail end of PS Read Line. At the very end,
he's like a
it says
line master.
Set to default. Okay, but it's that one thing you can't change in the console properties.
So this is something I noticed that was kind of interesting is when you run that,
Uh-huh.
you get host and you set the color, it doesn't actually change the whole color, at least in ISE, until you shut down and bring it back up. Otherwise, it just does that.
You can't do a
right
CLS and get it?
So, maybe if I do a clear, it'll do it.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it will.
No. So if I relaunch ISE, you'll see the whole color is now changed.
Yep.
So there's definitely some weird things when you start messing
Probably
with
just a
colors.
way to refresh the session.
Well, maybe if I just do a new session in
What did you get out
PowerShell,
of
ISE,
it?
it might do.
What happens if you go into VS Code? Does it do the same thing, or is it handle it better?
Oh, and VS Code works different from all the other
Yeah,
hosts.
VS Code is different because it's a different engine. It's all different because it's actually using the integrated console, which is slightly different as well.
Which is why the current user, current host profile is important, because you can define your different color changing functions for the different kinds of hosts to do the right commands for that kind of host.
So that is a good point. So the all host is running for all hosts no matter what, no matter if it's ISE or all those.
Exactly.
Versus ISE.
What about versions of PowerShell?
So I kind of talked.
What about them?
So
Is there a different host for each version?
no.
Does it always
different host for each version
So if I
within
launch
VS Code?
PowerShell 5.1,
Windows?
Yeah, between 5.1 and
some
PowerShell
versions
7.
Well,
different.
Windows PowerShell and PWSH are two different things, and PowerShell are two different things. And so same thing with 6.
I have
Those are all different. Now whether they're
You should try
but are they
PS
still gonna
homes
read the
They're going to use PS Home.
That's gonna be.
If those PS Home values are the same, it's going to be the same. So if you define the PS Home to see something else, you know,
Which right now, but the profile path is different from Windows 5.1 versus PowerShell Core
because you
versus PowerShell 7.
are they all different?
Yeah.
The profile paths for all three are separate.
It just
Yeah, you
depends.
don't do control
There's
C,
a couple of
because
functions.
control
We
C
have
has a
other
function.
Does anybody else want to
No, I
share?
mean, you can.
you do it
This-
Yeah, if you, are you
Well,
change
no,
or?
also,
Okay, cool.
you can change
Yes.
the fonts.
So I think Stevie,
You
you're
can
up.
change,
Whenever you're-
But I mean, you can
You're ready.
grow and shrink your windows.
Mhm.
All the normal Windows stuff is in there.
Mhm.
Because we wrote it.
He was having mic issues, but now he's available.
Tell them to talk to
Yeah,
Mike.
Apparently.
Tell Mike, you know,
You guys,
Mike issues.
Hey, there it is.
Hey,
All right.
worked out his mic.
Sweet. Yeah, sorry, I was being a pain.
Forgive you this time.
Mike is, you know, you can't blame it on
This
Mike.
also means that,
Don't blame
you
Mike.
can bring up your WSL window.
Let me see if I can share something.
Oh, you
Um,
bring up WSL.
everybody see my screen all right? Sort of
Yes.
happy. All right.
Yeah, we got to make that bigger.
Settings.
I will make it bigger here in a second.
Enhance.
Is the code, that's on Mac OS?
Yeah. So, can everybody see this? Okay.
Can you make it bigger? A little bit more?
Yeah, I can go a little bigger. Just for you, man. Just for you. There we go.
Yeah, cool.
So my profile is nothing fancy. There's some silly stuff in here, like this dad joke thing. So every time I launch PowerShell, I get a random dad joke from this dad joke API,
There you go.
which is where this is coming from.
That's real value right
Heads
here.
up.
Yeah, real value. Real value. Also, for my profile, I like being very minimalistic about things. So, like, if I were to CD into, say, like my documents and my Git folder, I don't want that full path. I just want the topmost directory from there. And then I also like having the time in my terminal, so I don't have to like look up in the corner of my screen or anything like that for the time. So lets me know I've got a clock here as well. A little bit too much work to move your eyes to the right, guys. So
Probably saves time. Doing that, right?
Save that. But it's that's a good dad joke, right?
You're all night. Sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Steve, I want to congratulate you. Having the timestamp in your command line can be really handy in figuring out how long that job took to run that you just ran.
it can't. Yeah. So in order to do that, this is kind of the string that I've got cobbled together to make that happen.
So I just want to point out too, for everybody who kind of also saw, we kind of talked about it before. So effectively, he's reconfiguring the prompt. You see it's just function, prompt, and then he's doing some stuff. So whatever's inside there will rebuild whatever the prompt is. So it's not, you know, magic. It's just, you can do whatever the heck you want in there. And every single time you go hit enter, it will rerun whatever that code is. So that also means that be cognizant if you're going to do some junk within the prompt, because it's going to run every single time.
Yep. Then I've got another function called pop GitHub or pop GH alias to PGH that just launches my GitHub account in a browser, so I don't have to think about it from a terminal. I don't have to launch code or launch Chrome or anything like that. I can just do PGH and my GitHub repository opens. So that's kind of handy. Stand up is for our daily stand up meeting, so I can just say start stand up and it dumps me into our daily stand up meeting here at Choco. Update box links. We've got a couple of chocolatey packages, especially when you're on a trial or things like that we have hosted up in Box that get attached to emails. And also if I need to share something with you, if I'm like working with you on a support issue or something, and I fix a package for you, I'll drop it in Box and then give you a link to download it. Well, the link in Box is not, it will take you to the thing, but then you also have to, in addition to that, click a button to download the file. But if you rewrite the URL to this and add .nupkeg onto the end of it, it will just launch that link and immediately start downloading the file. So this update Box link enables me to just copy in the share link from Box and spit out the actual link that I can then give to the customer. So it's just something to speed me up. And then this convert to Chaco object does just what it sounds like it's going to do. It takes the output of Chaco list local only and converts it into a PowerShell object instead with a name and a version. Or if you pass in the audit flag, it will convert in all of the audit information as well, so that you can have your installed by, what domain it's on, and what user requested it if you're using the agent. So not a lot in my profile, but there's enough useful stuff in here to just kind of keep me productive and speed me up when I'm doing a couple of things my day to day. So that is my profile.
Right on. Short and sweet. Cool.
Yeah.
For sure.
I like the idea of that at that point is, just defining some functions that are available to you to have always be available. One of the things I think I put in my profile, I think I jumped right over it, is that I actually created some other stuff, and I created a couple aliases that I used later on or just happen to always have. And so I defined them in my profile so that I always have, so select string and just
PowerShell command aliases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can create a new alias and that kind of stuff. You can just define aliases to whatever letters you want. And so it just says, hey, like in new alias is, I say SS and it's select string. So whatever I want, SS this, and then it selects it out.
One of the things that I have in my profile is a function that will connect me to Exchange Online, Exchange On-Prem. But in addition to that, it'll use different creds. So I actually have a different credential object stored locally in my documents folder that I actually import CLI XML and pass it to the function to connect as that specific user into Exchange or something of that nature too. So for my work, I can't show it because it's not that complicated. It's essentially connecting to different services with different credentials, right? And then another one, I have get all of my 2008 R2 servers in my org because everybody keeps asking me how many are left. So. But
so just a function that does that.
Yeah, it's just a function around a 80 computer wrapper with properties filtering and around 2008 R2. There it is.
Well, that's a good point. It's like some of the stuff is like wrapper functions.
Oh yeah.
You kind of mentioned that do that. So I put my stuff in module. So like those wrapper stuff, I put into modules, and so it's just my work module, and then so the machine will go and connect to that module and do from there. But effectively, it's just a wrapper, so it's all there. So I have a bunch of stuff. It's like get my 80 computer. So I've customized what 80 computer is. So I can just give it certain variables, and then it just gives me the stuff I want instead of having to build all those parameters.
Another thing is because I work in multiple domains, multiple forests too, I have all that saved and pre-configured in my profile in each function. So I don't have to worry about switching to passing a different domain FQDN to my server parameter and my 80 computer. It's all there. It's all just gets it. So
we have anybody else who wants to share, or do we want to?
Yeah, I don't think we have any more online unless someone else wants to.
Somebody wants
speak
to share.
up.
We have a few more minutes.
Got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna just throw in
Andy.
Here, I get to share.
Andy, yeah.
Oh, Andy, you want to share?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. You want to steal control?
Yeah.
I was gonna show my wrapper. I was gonna show a wrapping function for my 80 user.
If you don't wrap while showing it, then you're not going.
Yo, let me tell you about that. Oh, I don't know.
Well then.
So again, there's the get 80 user, and then so I defined some parameters that are my default stuff for, hey, I always want to get back the SAM account name, the given name, and the surname.
Yep.
But then at that point, so those are the properties I want, or I can define some extra properties as, actually, let me start with the first begin. So I defined, it says you can define the last name, first name, and then whatever properties. So our AD username and the identities are like these convoluted, strings. It's not like, first name, last name, whatever. So, and when you're doing get AD user today, you can't use wildcards and stuff like that. So this will accept wildcards. So I can say, get, Tom, SM for give me all the Smiths, and it'll just give me everybody. And so effectively what it does that, here's my default properties. I can ask for more properties, but then what it does is it creates an LDAP filter. It dynamically creates an LDAP query based upon that, and then just calls a single get AD user with the LDAP filter that I defined on the fly as what I passed it in, and then with parameters, all the other stuff. And then if I actually defined a switch object that says groups, it actually goes and gets the groups that the user is in, and so it throws it in. So otherwise, get my AD user, give me the users. But if I said add the groups, we'll get the groups and add it to that object. And so now I'm going to get this user plus all their groups as one object, and then I can go pull it back. And so as part, and so it's just an extra little thing that I wanted to do. And so I had it in my profile at one point, and then I threw it out there so everybody else can use it. But it's just a wrapper. It's kind of like beyond profiles, but that is something I think people could use.
Yeah, so I think Andy said he could share. If you want to go ahead and share, Andy, go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, unmute and share.
Okay, hang on a second. Look how to do this.
Someone asked about why do you quote a string variable? I don't know where he saw that. But
No worries. It's a basic question. No, no.
Why do you
There's no
quote
basic.
string?
There's no. So the Danish ask, why do you quote a string variable?
In case there's spaces in it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example where.
Danish, is that answer? Yeah. Yep.
I think it's because you're taking a string as part of your function, and he's asking why you wrap quotes around it in case someone puts a space in there. It will still take it, not cause an issue.
Yeah. Well, at this point too, is I'm defining all these parts, and I'm escaping a bunch of other stuff. So at this point. So Andy, you're up. You want to share?
Okay.
There you
go. Okay, so funny story. You're talking about the quoting the strings. Our bosses had our usernames as first name space last name, so we had a lot of code that broke because
Wait, the
username is Andy.
Oh boy.
So rather than being Andy space Helsby, if we typed in, we didn't have username in quotes, and then we tried to do CD space username, it would break because it was doing CD uses Andy. My username is actually Andy space Helsby.
I'd quit. Wow.
Hey Andy, can you make that a little bit bigger?
Yeah, sure. Hang on a second.
Oh, that's crazy.
Control plus.
My favorite is that we use the first couple letters, including the middle initial. But if they don't know your middle initial, you get an X. That's why I got an X. I have a middle name, but they didn't know what it was when I was hired, so I got an X. Like, excuse me?
And the fun part is you get collisions in any scheme any scheme other than letting you pick it, they get collisions, and then you get different things.
Oh yeah, and then the other people, their username is SSSSS. What? It's all S's, 4 S's. What kind of username is that? It's all the Unix days. That was his username in the Unix days.
Okay, so the first thing I actually do is, so I transcript every PowerShell thing I do into log files. So that way when I go back, I can find out what I did. I work for an MSP, so I'm constantly rewriting everything. So my logs go into a temp PS logs directory. I include my username. And the files are always dated with month and day, which we'll see in a second. I just look, it's .text. So what this actual function does is it checks to see if I have a file. So I check the path to see if there's a file name in the PS logs directory, starting with or ending in year, month, date. And if I do, I set a flag or a variable already run equals true. The reason for that is later on, I check to see if that flag is run. And then if it is, I don't need to run a whole load of variables or functions procedures because I've already run it once today. So this is a good way of saying only run these functions once a day. That's the way I did that. Seems to work pretty well. Second thing I do is, no, because when I do the actual transcript, which we'll see down later on.
All right, never mind. Sorry, getting ahead of you.
I actually put the date and time. Actually, it's here. So this is setting the variable. I put basically the same, but now I'm putting minutes and seconds. So that's where the collisions go away. So now every file. So if I have one at 0910 and one at 0915.
Oh.
Once a day, I have a file that already exists of 0915, so I don't need to run my functions, which you'll see in a minute. Basically, this is setting the variable up, and then I start my transcript. So I do have a cleaner version of this, which checks to see if I'm already running the start transcript. If I am, it stops the transcript and then creates a new one. Next thing it does is actually sets the window title to be the transcript variable. So if I show this one, so this is my PowerShell and it has the file name for the log. So if I have 15 PowerShell windows open at the end of the day and I'm trying to work out where's the log file, I could write $transcript log and it'll show me the file name, or I can just look at the top of the.
So Andy, you're only sharing your VS Code, so we're showing a blank screen. No worries. That's fine.
Basically, the title bar shows you the file. I'll show you a demo at the end. The other thing I do, I don't want to store my password, keys or secrets or credentials in the history. Up arrow in PowerShell and you've accidentally typed in a secret or credential password. So what this does is takes that out of the actual history line. So if you type the word password, and when you
Andy, your mic's kind of going lower.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes,
that's way better.
Much.
Sorry about that. So these are the keywords that I don't want to show when I do an up arrow in PowerShell in the history. If anyone's looking to see what I actually did, it hides it from somebody happened to be on my screen and looking at what I'm doing, or me accidentally scrolling up and showing someone when they're looking over my shoulder. Prompt, this is the function we've already talked about. What this one does, this is checking to see if I'm an administrator. And if I am an administrator, I set the title of my PowerShell to say bracket admin. That's it to the top. And then my prompt, I actually have bracket A bracket and it's in gray and red. So my prompt in PowerShell actually shows me that I can quickly see. I don't like to change the colors in the background like other people do. I just prefer seeing it in the prompt. Downside of that, if you're copying and pasting stuff from your transcript logs, you've got to go through and delete all these bracket A brackets. But you can search and replace and finally, my prompt, so it does a bracket A bracket if I'm an admin, then it writes the current date, time, and then I have another function which I'm not going to go into, which basically changes directories to short names. So if I I put a lot of my scripts in C Andy scripts. I don't need to know that my files are in C Andy scripts. I just need to know that I'm in scripts. So it changes the text to say scripts instead of C Andy scripts. And then finally it finishes it with a bracket, so you end up with the standard bracket like you would normally get in a prompt. That does my prompt. At the end of this, so now I've set my prompt, so this is my already run, so if not already run. So if I haven't run this once today, now I go through my scripts, get packed. It used to be a function that worked that would go and get the packed book of the day and show me whether it's something I wanted to read. I run Choco outdated. So what that would do is list all the programs that I have in Chocolatey and whether they're updated or so I need to be updated. It displays on the screen, hey, you need to run, the command if you can't remember what the chocolatey command is to update your programs. And then I run update module. So what this should do is go and update all of the modules. So if they're out of date, it'll go ahead. That does take quite a while to run, which is why it runs once a day as opposed to every time I run PowerShell. Finally, I have the PowerShell version because I'm often trying to work out has PowerShell upgraded or not. So I dump that to my text file. And finally, I have a couple of things I talked about earlier about changing the colors and my custom scripts. So like CAndy scripts just displays as scripts. So those are my two links for that. And then what I do, I work in Office 365. So I have a command module, which you can get from here, that allows you to quickly connect to Office 365. I type in my username, and then it prompts me for my password and does all the two-factor and all that sort of stuff. If I can show you a demo.
I'm telling you, Steve's so happy. It's like, I see Choco.
Chocolatey, yeah.
I see Choco.
It's chocolatey all the time. I've contributed to a couple. So this is my full PowerShell. You can see it now.
Yeah, you able to make it a little bit bigger? Or?
Wow, look at that. He's got a little ASCII art. I'm impressed. ASCII art. Let alone multicolor ASCII art.
You may not have. No, you have the time too. There you go. Time and name.
So you can see there's the date and time of when I ran this program. So if I just do, so you can, as I'm going through, to see date and time. So this does give me a good way of going back and saying how long did that process take? I give the date and time in my timestamps. It also shows up in the transcript logs. If I run as my admin prompt, you get a little bracket A in red that signifies I'm
I think I like that better. I'm gonna steal that code.
I've uploaded it to the GitHub, so feel free.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you. So I think Brett also said he had a profile to share. Do we want to try to squeeze one more in? And...
Yeah. I don't know. Well, we can do it. We can go. If everyone wants to leave, feel free. But hey, Brett, yeah, let's go.
Let's see what you got. And then we'll probably, I guess, call after that.
Unmuted?
Yeah, I'm not hearing him.
I don't hear you, Brett.
Marco. Marco.
Bueller.
Anything?
No, it's gonna be a presentation by mime.
He's unmuted.
We're going across the water, so.
Well, Andy sounded like he was. Didn't sound like he was from
Brett's,
South Carolina.
Wow, 1 a.m. over there.
Where is he? Needs to plug that thing into a
So where's
charger.
Brett?
Well,
Brett
is in
sleep.
England,
Yeah.
Oh,
outside of London.
28%?
Yeah, Brett, you probably have to plug your microphone into the tower.
Oh, don't give him a hard time.
No.
Brett's a good guy. He presented before.
That's one beer too many.
Yeah, he had too many beers in.
That's the problem.
So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask. And I certainly hope that, for the people who are new, I'm not.
Hello.
But
Hey.
I finally made it. Okay.
All right.
So, yeah. So we'll let Brett go, and then I'll give my spiel.
Can you see my screen?
There, you're back to sharing. Hey, you Brett. Yep. Good.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
you gotta make that bigger, of course, Brett.
Boop. This is. I've just changed machines, so I've just started on a Mac, so I'm still busy getting everything set up. But this was my old profile, if you can see that.
Okay. Nice.
So this is I'm slowly porting everything over. It's basically this is a toolbox module, which I'll quickly go into in a second after this. I've set a lot of functions which on my Windows machine took me to specific folders that I used quite a lot, Git folders, and then I set up aliases for each of those so I could just run aliases to jump to those folders. And then I've got a sort reverse function which I actually stole off Matthias, who was presenting for you guys the other month. And it takes an array and sorts it in reverse as it says. Editor services command suite, if you don't use that, you should. But basically it gives you a lot of functions in Visual Studio Code where you can automatically splat parameters. You can type them all out and then it'll splat them for you. And then I've got some key handlers in VS Code as well, just to overwrite some key combinations that it didn't pick up. And then these key handlers here, what that does in console is it automatically adds closing brackets for you if you're running that in a PowerShell console.
Ooh, I like that.
Stealing that one.
Yeah. All right, so this is on your GitHub, right? I think
this is on my work GitHub, but if you go into the PS readline documentation, these are examples that are in there where I ripped them out of. And you've got things like put the parenthesis around a selection. So if you highlight something and press Alt and bracket, it'll put a bracket at the start and end when you're in the command line. So you don't have to go close bracket, home, open bracket, end, dot, count. You just highlight it all, Alt and bracket, and then dot count. An argument completer for PowerShell gallery, because I've got an internal PowerShell gallery that package repository that we use. So what this does is every time I go find module and hit repository, I can tab through which repositories I've got set up. And then I've got default parameter values for find module and install module, so that it automatically picks those if I don't want to specify a specific one. And then I've got PoshGit set up here on my Windows machine, but I've been reluctant to set that up on the Mac. I'm going to just write some VCS stuff, or I've already written some VCS stuff in a slightly different prompt. I'll show you in a second. This basically gets a date, writes it out to color, gets the history count of the last command run, and works out how long that took and writes that out. And I've got my chocolatey profile, and then I've got this type accelerators. So you know how in here you've got things for PS custom object. It's a type accelerator for system.management.automation.ps custom object. What that actually does is it allows you to abbreviate more type accelerators. So you know how generic list, if you do generic list, it doesn't complete in there, but you can basically add your own abbreviations for really long commands by using this. You just do accelerators add and then give it the type that you want to add. So like this, you could down to you could just type accelerators, which is really handy in console for when you're mashing stuff around. What I've got in here, current user, all hosts, is
you saw that right there? Let me stop you there. Did you see how he did that? Mm-hmm. So how I want to load code and get to that profile and let it launch automatically. So, all right, cool.
Makes sense.
Just want to make sure everybody saw that.
I use Insider's code, so I need to abbreviate that to code. I just haven't set that up yet. This is a prompt which I literally set this up today because, like I say, it's a brand new laptop. But I've got some color presets here for some ANSI escape sequences, which I think Trevor was mentioning in the chat earlier. And this basically looks at the last success, which uses the $question mark to see if the last execution was correct. And then this gets the last execution time of the command and appends whether it's milliseconds or seconds and changes the color based on how long it ran. And then this is what it outputs. But then instead of using Git, I've got some parsing of the Git folders if it's in the Git folder. So it looks for the .git path. and then it does a get rev parse, finds a symbolic name of the path you're in, and then it does some other bits and pieces. I'll show you in the console. It's easier to explain. If the branch matches master, it changes the color of the branch I'm in and outputs that, and then I minimize how long the path is. This is the output of the entire thing, and then I also set the window title, whether or not I'm an admin, and the present working directory I'm in. If I go back to this, minimize that so you can see through it. You can see there I've got, because I just closed code inside as it took 259 to run my profile there. But if I go into git personal Vulkan, because I know I've got multiple branches in there, it shows up. If I do it, I'll not do a start sleep to run that because it'll just take ages. But the toolbox module that I mentioned is these multipasses don't work, but on Windows they utilized import and export CLI XML so that I could serialize credential objects and store them and just import them into my session. So for things like what Trevor was showing, where he grabs the OTP token, this is just like regularly used passwords which were stored in a file so that I could import them. It doesn't work on Mac though. But my favorite one is get syntax, which I use all the time. It prints out the syntax info for any command on the screen. So normally you would do get command, get child item syntax, and it would print it like that, which is impossible to read. When it prints down the screen, you can see here that because this doesn't have the square brackets around it, that's a mandatory parameter within that parameter set. So it's a lot easier when you're looking at. And it's weird because all of the docs on the docs.microsoft site are all in that folder, all in that format as well. So doing things like that, it's a lot easier to read.
Nice. Yep.
And if I do a git check out master on that, because I've been messing with that, but it changes the fact that I'm on master to red. That syntax. I had a look to see if I could port that over to C# into PowerShell 7 to see if it would make it to the GA release of 7. But my C# foo is weak. So, but Dave, yes, all of this stuff, I've got a blog post which I outlined all of my VS Code setup from a little while back on my blog, which is just millab.co.uk. I can send a link over if needs be. There's a VS Code post in there which goes over a lot of my profile settings, a lot of the toolbox module that I've got in there, and the toolbox module with my profile in. It's on my work profile. I've got I had it in toolbox. I had a backup profile function which CD'd to the location, copied my profile to a Git repo, and then did a Git push, a Git commit AM with a timestamp, and then pushed my profile up to here. You can see here that's the commit message. Profile on that date. If I made changes to my profile, I just did backup profile, I copied it to the Git folder, and then pushed it up with a standard commit message with a timestamp.
I like that.
Cool. I haven't got this public, but I can make this public if people want to see it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so my commits in there, all just timestamps of when they've last updated it. Nice. I can copy this over to my main, my public, if people want to see it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome.
So there's at least three yeses in the room, so please do. Or just send us a link to where it is. And then so definitely the VS Code thing. Either shoot me an IM or Mike message, and then we'll get that up to you. And the same thing with Andy. Reach out to us.
And Stevie and Trevor.
Yeah, Stevie and Trevor, please do.
For you guys. Very cool.
That is strong.
I won't get syntax.
Super cool.
Very cool.
Is that your toolbox? I think I pushed to GitHub. The toolbox up to repos. Yeah, there's the toolbox folder with all the functions in.
Okay.
You've got there's the backup profile functions in there as well. Get multipass, which is what I was talking about. It imports XML, encrypted XMLs, so you can use them in sessions. So if I'm doing a lot of testing with sort of systems, just when you do new multipass, it just creates an output object and outputs the object. So you can, it takes in string array of names, so you can have ServiceNow credentials, ServiceNow username, ServiceNow this, that, and the other, or whatever. You know what I mean? You can have like 7 or 8 in there, and it serializes the entire object out. So when you import it, you then just creds.ServiceNow when you want to pass a credential parameter to it. Yeah, I'll chuck some.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so like all of the stuff that I used on a daily basis when I was passing credential objects around, I just serialized it, saved it into my documents.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
I like that because it doesn't matter what it is.
And then you can actually add that to your profile and just do import CLI XML and just have it as like a and then you just access it. Yeah. I've got a blog post on that as well. So VS Code was in there with all of my customizations. It's slightly changed now that I've moved to a Mac, but I'm busy porting a lot of it over to Recompatible. And the credential ones are all in there as well. So and pretty much everything's on my GitHub. Anything that's in me work GitHub, I can move across if somebody just wants to ping us and ask.
All right.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett.
Wow, Brett gets a clap, and I don't think I got a clap.
Hey, man, I'll clap for Git 80.
All right. All right. Thanks. You're gonna stop the recording. Thanks.
Yeah.